By the end of the 1990s, the world of supercars was already dominated by major manufacturers. Ferrari was developing new generations of its legends. Lamborghini was struggling to survive after turbulent ownership changes, and Porsche was increasingly proving its technological superiority. It seemed that there was no room left for small, independent manufacturers. And yet, at that exact moment, a project appeared in Italy that was so strange, so niche, and so ambitious that today it almost sounds like an automotive urban legend. The Turchetti Raptus was a car created by a small group of enthusiasts who decided to combine the philosophy of a racing prototype with the brutal simplicity of a lightweight track car. It did not have a huge budget, a massive factory, or the backing of a giant corporation. What it did have was a tubular space frame chassis, a centrally mounted Alfa Romeo engine, pushrod suspension, and a weight lower than most city hatchbacks. The car looked like a mixture of a Le Mans prototype, an Italian kit car, and a small supercar from an alternate reality. Most interesting of all, the Raptus never entered normal production, which is why today it remains one of the most mysterious and almost completely forgotten Italian creations of the late 20th century. Only a handful of prototypes were built, and many people still do not even know that such a car ever existed. The history of Turchetti Automobili begins with a man named Pietro Turchetti. He was an Italian automotive journalist born in 1949, deeply in love with Alfa Romeo and with the Italian culture of sports cars in general. Turchetti belonged to a group of people who could never see automobiles merely as transportation devices. For him, motoring was art, emotion, and engineering combined into one. During the 1990s, he decided to create his own automotive brand. In practice, this was almost madness. The market was ruthless toward small manufacturers, while homologation and production costs increased year after year. Nevertheless, Turchetti, together with the Milan-based UK Garage and the design studio Piattolini Design, began work on a car called the Raptus. From the very beginning, the project was intended to have two personalities, a road-going version and a racing version compliant with FIA CN category regulations for lightweight sports prototypes. That is precisely why the car was designed more like a racing machine than a traditional road coupe. The priorities were low weight, exceptional handling, and simplicity of construction. Turchetti was not trying to create a luxurious Ferrari for millionaires. He wanted to build a lightweight and brutal machine for true driving enthusiasts. The first Turchetti Raptus P4 prototype was publicly presented in 1999. Even its appearance immediately revealed its unusual character. The car was only 4 meters long, approximately 1 meter tall, and extremely wide. Its doors opened upward in scissor style, instantly bringing Lamborghini to mind. At the same time, however, the bodywork was much more raw and functional than that of typical Italian supercars. The designers were clearly inspired by racing cars and Le Mans prototypes. The long, low nose, forward-positioned cabin, and aggressively descending bodyline made the Raptus look far more like a track machine than a road car. Interestingly, despite its very small dimensions, the car had dramatic proportions. Many people who saw the Raptus for the first time could not even determine what it really was. It did not resemble a classic coupe, nor did it look like a typical kit car. It was something in between a racing prototype and an extreme road machine. During public displays, the car attracted enormous attention, particularly among enthusiasts and people involved in motorsport. At one point, the car was even inspected by Piero Ferrari, son of Enzo Ferrari, as well as executives from Alfa Romeo and Alfa Corse. That alone demonstrates that the project was taken seriously by the Italian automotive community. The construction of the Turchetti Raptus was exceptionally advanced for a company of its size. The car was based on a tubular space frame chassis made from chromoly steel tubes. This was a solution commonly used in motorsport because it provided excellent rigidity while maintaining relatively low weight. The bodywork was made from plastic composites reinforced with carbon fiber, which was also a highly ambitious solution for such a small manufacturer. The most impressive aspect, however, was the car's weight. Depending on the version and source, the Raptus weighed between approximately 500 and 650 kilograms. That is less than most modern city cars in the A segment. Such low weight meant a fantastic power-to-weight ratio, even with relatively modest engine output. The car was also equipped with independent pushrod suspension, inspired directly by racing cars. This system allowed extremely precise suspension control and was normally found only in race cars and single-seater machines. Brembo supplied the brakes, while the lightweight wheels were made from magnesium. Everything was engineered around performance and handling. The Raptus was intended to be an incredibly light, fast, and brutal machine, more like a racing toy than a traditional supercar. The heart of the first prototype was an Alfa Romeo twin spark engine. It was a naturally aspirated four-cylinder unit, with 2 liters of displacement and 8 valves, producing around 170 horsepower at approximately 6,500 RPM. On paper, those figures did not seem spectacular, especially in the era of the Ferrari F50 and Lamborghini Diablo. However, the key factor was the car's weight. At roughly 550 kilograms, even 170 horsepower was enough to provide performance comparable to much more powerful cars. Some sources mentioned a top speed of approximately 250 kilometers per hour. More importantly, the car was supposed to deliver extraordinary agility and immediate steering response. Power was sent to the rear wheels through a 5-speed manual gearbox. More powerful versions were also planned. The company considered using a 16-valve 1.8-liter Honda engine, producing approximately 190 horsepower at nearly 7,900 RPM. For the racing version, there was even talk of a 200-horsepower ACS engine. Everything suggests that the designers treated the Raptus as a development platform, capable of receiving different powertrains and being adapted for both road use and competition. One of the most fascinating aspects of the project was the fact that the Turchetti Raptus was intended to become a fully homologated road car, despite being mechanically very close to a racing prototype. That is precisely why development lasted much longer than originally expected. After the launch of the P4 version in 1999, the company continued working on a more civilized GT variant. According to available sources, over the next 6 years, more than 200 modifications were introduced compared with the original design. The GT version was intended to be more refined, more comfortable, and ready for legal road use. However, the car retained its extreme silhouette and centrally mounted engine. In 2007, the completed model was even presented at the Monza circuit. This demonstrates just how ambitious the entire project really was. A tiny Italian company spent years trying to bring a niche supercar into production almost entirely, without major financial backing. In the automotive world, stories like this nearly always end in financial difficulties, and exactly the same thing happened here. Turchetti Automobili was unable to secure the funds necessary for mass production. Despite enormous passion and very interesting technical solutions, the project slowly faded away. At one point, the company even planned to expand its model lineup. Around 2002, information surfaced regarding a new car called the Overfast GT. Unlike the lightweight and minimalist Raptus, this was intended to be a more traditional grand touring supercar. Plans called for the use of a General Motors V6 engine producing around 400 horsepower. The project was extremely ambitious because the company intended to launch production after building the 25 Raptus units required by FIA homologation regulations. In practice, however, the company never reached that level of production capability. The costs of homologation, manufacturing, and further development were simply too high. The market for small supercar manufacturers is incredibly brutal even today, and at the end of the 1990s, there was practically no room for microscopic companies without substantial financial backing. As a result, the overfast GT remained nothing more than a dream and a concept. The Raptus itself also never entered true series production. The history of Turchetti Automobili resembles many other Italian projects of this type. Enormous passion, excellent ideas, very limited financial resources, and ultimately the collapse of the company before commercial success could ever be achieved. One of the reasons why the Turchetti Raptus is so fascinating today is its extreme rarity. The exact number of produced examples is not entirely known. Most sources suggest that only 2 major prototypes were built: the yellow Raptus P4 and the later blue Raptus GT. However, it is possible that several additional chassis or unfinished development projects also existed. The lack of official documentation means that the history of the car remains surrounded by mystery. In practice, this makes the Raptus far rarer than most of the world's most exotic supercars. Even cars such as the Ferrari F40 or McLaren F1 were produced in the hundreds. The Turchetti Raptus probably exists in the form of just 1 or 2 functioning examples. This has turned the car into something of a cult object among enthusiasts interested in forgotten prototypes and niche Italian automotive history. The problem is that the car almost never appears publicly for sale. There is essentially no real market for such a machine, because it is difficult to compare it with anything else. It is simultaneously a prototype, the work of a tiny manufacturer, and a historical artifact from the end of the analog era of garage-built supercars. Determining the modern value of the Turchetti Raptus is extremely difficult precisely because of its uniqueness. The car practically does not exist within the auction world, and most people have never even heard of it. Theoretically, one could consider it a worthless prototype from a small company that never achieved success. On the other hand, the collector world increasingly appreciates unique and extremely rare creations from the 1990s. In recent years, interest in niche supercars and prototypes that never entered production has grown dramatically. If one of the surviving Raptus examples were to appear at a major auction today, its value could be surprisingly high. Realistically, the car could potentially achieve a price ranging from approximately €250,000 to even €600,000, especially if it retained complete documentation and its original specification. To the average collector, such a figure might seem absurd for an almost unknown automobile. But for enthusiasts of Italian motoring and unique prototypes, the Raptus is far more than just another car. It is a symbol of an era in which small workshops and groups of dreamers still attempted to challenge the established giants of the automotive industry. Today, the Turchetti Raptus remains one of the most mysterious and underappreciated Italian automotive creations of the late 20th century. It never achieved commercial success, never won major races, and never entered serial production. Nevertheless, it perfectly represents the spirit of Italian motoring. It was a project born out of passion, courage, and the belief that even a tiny group of people could create something extraordinary. The car combined lightweight construction, race-inspired engineering, and unmistakable Italian styling. Thanks to its centrally mounted engine, extremely low weight, and pushrod suspension, the Raptus was probably an incredibly emotional machine to drive. At the same time, it looked like something from an alternate reality, where small Italian workshops could still build their own supercars without the backing of massive corporations. Today, the Turchetti Raptus is almost completely forgotten, but that is exactly what makes it so fascinating. It is one of those cars that reminds us that automotive history is not made solely by giant brands and million-dollar budgets. Sometimes the most interesting projects are born in tiny workshops, created by people crazy enough to believe they could build their own supercar.